Now these two impressive yet relatively unknown tanks are now the mainstay of the armoured forces of the Republic of Korea, that is South Korea. The K1 entered service with the South Korean Army in 1988, and later the K1 series went on to be used also with the South Korean Marines. The K1 gets its 88 designation from being released or entering service in 1988. So let's look at these specifications. First though, this video of course is by Mark Hampton, and I believe Mark Hampton is a veteran of the US military, so check out his videos on YouTube. Anyway, let's look at these specifications. The specs here are for the K1A1, and let's get on with it. Weight 54 tons, actually a little over 54 tons. The length 9.71 meters or 31.8 feet. Width 3.60 meters or 11.8 feet. Height 2.25 meters or 7.3 feet. This tank is a crew of 4, commander, gunner, loader and driver. Main armament is a KM256 120mm. Now this gun is a licensed produced version of the German Rheinmetall RH120, which is also the basis for the gun used in the Abrams. Secondary armament is a 12.7mm, which is a 50 cal K6 HMG on the right for the commander. We have a 7.62 M60D on the left pintle mount for the loader. Now remember here, when it comes to these secondary machine guns and secondary armament, they're pretty easy to take on and off, so I would not use these as a main identifying feature at all. Also a 7.62mm M60E2-1 on a coaxial mount. Operational range 500 k's or 300 miles, speed 65 k's or 40 miles an hour on roads, or 40 k's, which is 25 miles per hour cross country. And now on we go with the identifying features of this tank. We can see here the upper glacis plate appears to be in two parts. The lower portion in that red rectangle of the upper glacis plate has a steep angle to it. And the upper part of the upper glacis plate, which you can see in that yellow oval, is almost horizontal with a slight upward slope. As you can see here from the front, this tank looks quite similar to the M1. Now in saying that, of course, there are some differences too, and even with the hull of the M1 it looks quite different even front on, because the hull of the M1 doesn't have the upper glacis plate basically divided into two parts like this one here does. And so the lower glacis plate angles rearwards under the tank, and it is a very well sloped lower glacis plate, and it has quite a shallow slope. And this is quite interesting. Say compare it with the British Challenger 2, where that lower glacis plate is quite steep compared with this tank here. And looking at the right side here, we can see that the rear of the tank hull is flat. It then slopes down under the rear of the turret. Then it is flat towards the front of the tank, where the hull again slopes to the very front of the tank. And you can see there what I mean if you follow those yellow arrows from the back to the front on the sides there. Now this particular tank here is the K1. We're going to see later on that there's a K1E1 upgrade. Now the K1E1 is most easily identified by the larger gun barrel, which is the 120mm, which has a humped fume extractor. We'll also see later on that the K1A1 are new production tanks, while the K1E1 is an upgrade of the existing K1 variants. And naturally, the K1E1 receives the latest in C4I. Now C4I technology, it stands for Command, Control, Communications, Computers and Intelligence. It is quite simply a way for the commander to receive improved battlefield information and improve his battlefield situational awareness, which can be quite useful when on a modern battlefield, when you're trying to integrate information coming in from a variety of sources, whether it's from satellites or aircraft or other tanks or other units. And now enough of that, and back on to ID features. So we can see here the rear of the hull is flat with a rectangular grille, as you can see in that red rectangle, and the rectangular grille stretches across the rear of the hull, And we also have two round exhausts under the grille, one on each side, as you can see in those attractive yellow circles. Okay, so here we have a 105 to a 120 millimeter main gun, depending on whether it's a K1 or K1A1 or K1E1 or K1A2. Anyway, no matter what variant, they all only have one main gun, as you can see in that yellow oval. Now notice here the sides of the turret slope outwards towards the front. Now note the storage boxes, as in that green oval there on the outside, can make the turret appear to have flat sides. It doesn't have, well, the sides, I should have said vertical sides, appear to have vertical sides. It doesn't have vertical sides. It does have flat sides, but the sides aren't vertical. The sides are angled out. That's what I was trying to say there. Anyway, look at that red arrow and you'll see what I mean. Okay, here we have a K1A2, and notice the muzzle reference system on the end of the barrel. Now ignore that thing, that boxy looking thing halfway along the barrel, because that's not normally there. So that is nothing for you to use as an identification when it comes to recognizing this vehicle. Don't do it. Pretend it's not there. Good job. Okay, so here we can see in this photo the commander's independent sight. Now on the K1A1, K1E1, we know this is a commander's panoramic sight. Now the panoramic sight is pretty cool, and it allows the commander to observe what's going on through 360 degrees, which is obviously quite useful. Now below that we can see the gunner's sight, and we also see here on the turret front there smoke discharges. Now I generally do not use smoke discharges as a recognition feature, although most people do. Same with sights. I kind of use those as secondary. Of course they can be useful though if you're trying to pick out specific variants of a tank. But as far as general recognition features go, all three of these to me aren't main recognition features. I would consider all three of these as secondary. But they can certainly be useful when it comes to deciphering which variant is which. And in this picture here we can see that the turret roof is sloped downwards to the front of the face of the turret, and the turret face slopes outwards and downwards, reminiscent of the M1. And of course we can see here that this is most likely the K1E1, and you can look at that great big bulge there, the extractor there in the middle of the barrel, quite a lot larger than that of the K1. With the hydropneumatic suspension, this tank can angle or kneel downwards. Pretty cool, huh? And sticking with the turret, we can see that the rear third of the turret is flat, and the forwards 2/3 of the turret slopes forward towards the turret face. Also here I've got that big red circle there, the gun mantlet. And of course the gun mantlet, that's where the barrel projects from. And we can see here storage boxes around or on the turret sides. And I usually consider storage boxes secondary features for identification purposes as well, as I prefer to use as identification features things that are less likely to be removed or things that are harder to remove. Anyway, if you look at my green lines there on the side of this tank, those there are meant to denote storage boxes. And here the top of the turret raises up on either side of the gun mantlet. You can see that there if you look at that top greenish oval. Also the turret has triangular cutouts on the bottom of the turret either side of the gun mantlet, as you can see in that larger green oval there at the bottom of the turret. That's reminiscent of course of the M1. And the gun mantlet is wedge shaped between the upper and lower mantlet, with a chine line at the midpoint. Once again, that reminds me of the M1. But this is not the M1, of course, is it? No, it's not. Good job. Okay, let's carry on. The rear of the turret is angled on both sides at both the rear and the left sides of the turret, as you can see in those yellow ovals. And the sides are flat at the rear. Now, on the K1A2, these angles are less obvious due to addition of extra equipment. But basically the turret has more of a hexagonal shape to it. Quite cool. And it's definitely a feature that helps identify this tank in my opinion. And looking at the suspension, we can see 6 pairs of road wheels in that large green oval on either side of this tank, of course, and we have a large gap between the second and third road wheels and a smaller gap between the third and the fourth. And normally the return rollers are hidden by side skirts or track skirts. We have a drive sprocket and that red circle at the rear, and we have an idler at the front in the blue circle. Generally speaking, if the engine of the tank is at the rear, the drive sprocket will be at the rear. And the only thing I can think of offhand which is different from that right now when it comes to the modern MBTs is the Israeli Merkava series. There may be others out there, but that's the only one I can think of right now. And here we have a nice pic of a M1 Abrams and a K1 side by side. As you can see, when you actually see them close together, they do look quite different. And here we are again, M1 and K1. Check them out. Look at the similarities and the differences. Get to know them. And you shouldn't have any problem differentiating between these two vehicles.